Welcome to Fed Pride. Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. Name of this show is Fed Pride. Reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. Today for me, it is the 16th of May, 2014. For you, it's probably next week, sometime in the 20s of May, or next month. I do a show, or at least I tape a show once a month, and it's on every week for a number of weeks. Now, you notice I have the Ukraine over here. There's still a crisis in the Ukraine. Russia's taken over the Crimea, and separatists have declared a Republic of Donetsk in this area over here, and Putin has pretty much declared that this whole area over here, all the way to the border of Moldova, is Novaya Russia and should be joined up with Russia. First, I'm going to talk about one other thing. I'm not going to turn the world, but probably the most important thing that's happened over this whole month that I'm probably not going to be talking about is the election in India. In India, the Congress Party was defeated. The official total results will be coming out probably later on Friday, May 16th, or Saturday. However, it's a very, very big deal because India is the second largest country in the world in population, over 1.25 billion people. They have, in the election, 566 million people actually voted, which is greater than the population of the entire United States, including women, children, and undocumented. So that's a very, very big deal. The winner is named Modi, and he's with the BJP, which is the Bharatiya Janata Party. I'm not sure what Bharatiya Janata means. However, the interesting thing about it is that is a Hindu nationalist party, and they're the successors of the RSS, which were the folks that shot Gandhi and assassinated him at the beginning of India's existence. His party was involved in riots as recently as 2002, where 1,000 Muslims were killed, and a train with Muslim not penitents, but pilgrims on it, was raided by BJP thugs, and hundreds were killed. Over 1,000 were killed in the whole thing. And just as a complete circle, turning everything on its ear, the Prime Minister of Pakistan congratulated Mr. Modi on his win. So I will follow events in India, and meanwhile I'll also talk about the events right here in the Ukraine, and something that I think is very, very important, the FCC ruling on net neutrality right in the United States. Okay, the reason I want to bring up the Ukraine, I've been talking about it for the last 2 months. It is a very, very big deal. Basically, Putin's Russia marched into Crimea, forced a kind of a fake referendum, which 97% of the people voted to separate themselves from the Ukraine, which is surprising because it's only 58% Russian speakers, and joined up with Russia. Russia annexed it. And then a few weeks later, there seemed to be some calm and the markets got back to normal. And a few weeks later, pro-Russian militants without any insignia started taking over administration buildings and police stations all around what they call the Donbass region, which is Donetsk and the area around Donetsk. And they declared themselves to be the Donetsk People's Republic, and had a referendum with a very, very odd statement. Do you think that the Donetsk region should have more autonomy or something like that? And declared that 96% of the people that voted said yes. It's kind of a weird thing because polls in the area said that 2/3 of the people, even in those two provinces, which are majority Russian speaking, are against this. And polls that could be open were the areas that the separatists controlled, which were just in the center cities of 10 cities and the region around Slavyansk, which is a little north of Donetsk. There's a city here called Mariupol, and in Mariupol, there was a battle last week where the Russian separatists showed up and took over the center city and the police force. The police force actually shot back, and they raided and took over the police headquarters. And then they were surrounded by pro-Ukrainians, oddly enough, and they shot seven people got shot. It's hard to say whether they were pro or anti, but the Russians were run out of the center city and then took it back over, the pro-Russians. And a very, very important thing happened yesterday and today, or was reported today, so it probably happened yesterday, is that the owner of the largest series of industrial plants in that area, his name is Ritan Akhmetov. He's a billionaire who has $12 billion in assets after this incident in Mariupol. Now, he owns factories in Mariupol that is the largest employer in the area. So out of a city of Mariupol is right here on the coast, out of a city of 460,000, he employs 50,000 people, which means that one person said everybody in this town is related to somebody who works in this guy's two plants. He basically organized not a militia, but a volunteer group with 19,000 signups of people to support union with Ukraine, mostly Russian speakers, because he said that if the Donetsk Republic declared its independence, as they said they would in this kind of phony referendum that they had, then basically all the products of his factories would be unsaleable. They'd be boycotted. In Europe, basically Russia, mostly steel factories and other metals factories. Russia produces the same things for its own benefit, so they export most of their production. And there'd be mass unemployment, and he's not going to put up with it. So the people from these two plants poured out into the city of Mariupol, which is the port town for this Russian Donetsk People's Republic, and ran the pro-Russian insurgents right out of the center of the city. They'll be patrolling the city. Apparently, something similar is going on in 4 other cities, including Donetsk, the capital of the Russian, pro-Russian Donetsk People's Republic. And the pro-Russians are just shocked and surprised. So they don't really know what to do about it, because if they shoot down the people that work for the #1 employer in the area, now the whole area of Donetsk province and Luhansk is mostly rural, and that's at the border. The fact of the matter is there's only about 7 million people in that whole area. This guy, Ritan Akhmetov, he employs 268,000 people in an area of 7 million. So, and he can raise volunteers. He's already done it. 19,000 of his workers signed up to support staying united with Ukraine. In fact, joining Europe for all intents and purposes. So, this has kind of caught the pro-Russians unawares. He's already taken over the second largest city in that Donetsk area. And his worker volunteers are deploying in 4 other cities. So we'll find out whether he wins tomorrow. Probably you'll find out in a month or two if you don't watch, because it seems like our news has stopped really covering all this good stuff. But I think this is the turning point against Putin's plan to take over this whole area all the way down here. Right here is the Transdniester Republic, which is kind of a smuggling area, which is majority Russian and actually part of Moldova across a big river called the Dniester. And he claims this whole area. Most of that area is actually majority Ukrainian speaking, although there is a large minority of Russians. But this area around Donetsk and Luhansk is majority Russian speaking, as was the Ukraine, which is already taken over by Putin. There's going to be an election on the 25th of May. So by the time you see this, the election will probably already be handled, and there'll be a legitimate president, not an interim president of Ukraine, at least Western Ukraine. It's most likely one of the oligarchs and a friend of Akhmatov, and consequently, Putin may be just about to lose almost all of Ukraine, unless he actually sends an army across. And basically, we've said that even if you just disrupt the elections and the Ukrainian or the pro-Russian separatists have already attacked the old Ukrainian electoral councils in the cities in the Donetsk area. So I have a feeling that this move by Akhmatov is before the election, and he wants his part, or the part that basically he controls the economy of, to vote in the Ukraine election as Ukrainians. And it's very, very likely that there'll either be battles between his people and the Russian separatists, or as in Mariupol, the Russian separatists will run scared with their tails between their legs. Basically, there's already 19,000 signed up for Akhmatov's workers, and there's only 1,500 armed Russians. Now, the 1,500 armed Russians, many of them are basically FSB or GRU, which is the Army intelligence there, and are some pretty tough guys. But there's also a bunch of criminals and Russia, Ukrainian mafias and people like that. Apparently, they're not so tough that they weren't run out of Mariupol within hours of the declaration and deployment. So these guys who work for the steel mill are at present unarmed, but I'm sure Akhmatov has access to hundreds of thousands of AK-47s. If he wants to, he could probably run the pro-Russians out of every area except that one area around Slavyansk. Slavyansk is the one area that the pro-Russians took over militarily, actually, with a perimeter in a normal military style. It only has about 200,000 people in it, surrounded by Ukrainian troops right now. But that's the only area that they really control militarily. Everything else is just thugs in the main buildings in the downtowns of Donetsk and Krasnoyarsk and all these other little towns. Now, they did try, the pro-Russians did try to take over Odessa, and this was about a week or two ago. I think I might have mentioned it in a previous show, but basically they were surrounded by pro-Ukrainians. There were Molotov cocktails thrown on either side. Now, one of the problems with barricading yourself in a building is that, and this is what happened in Odessa, the building was burned down around them, and 42 of the pro-Russian militants were killed within an hour or two. And they just stopped trying to take over Odessa. Odessa's key because if Novaya Russia is possible, in other words, Russia has to open up a military communications between Russia proper, which is here, and the Transdniester, which is over here, in which case they have to have the coastal road. So Odessa's on the coastal road, and so is Mariupol. And now the Donetsk people have lost their port even close to their area. And of course, the Ukrainians still control the area north of Crimea. So the whole thing may end up not being very practical for Putin over here, although there are stories that Putin is consolidating his power inside Russia, because there's just been a wave of patriotism over this takeover to protect their Russian speakers from Ukrainian fascists, who fought for Nazis in World War II and all this other propaganda. And so he has been taking over the media for a long time, but he's about to take over the last independent network. He's already shut down the internet and taken over internet companies in Russia. So he's consolidating literally totalitarian control using this crisis as an excuse inside Russia. Okay, so that's what's going on there. And it's important, I think. Meanwhile, as I said, here's India. The largest, those are the Indian states, it's so big, the largest democracy in the world. And we're going to see if we can find the United States. And here we go. Oh no, that's Antarctica. So please excuse me while I do this. I'll just start to talk. Now, there's a very, very important and disturbing thing that's been going on, and that is the net neutrality debate in the FCC that's been going on this week. And I haven't been talking about it much, and I should. Here's Washington, D.C., right there. The head of the FCC is named Tom Wheeler, and Tom Wheeler is an appointee by Obama, but he is an ex-lobbyist for Comcast and the cable industry. Anybody who's getting any speed internet is either getting it through the phone companies for the most part, or from the cable companies led by Comcast, which is now taking over Time Warner. It's the second largest cable company. And I had a whole show about broadband and how ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is basically the Koch brother front, has been going into the state governments and trying to squelch Google from fibering up and improving our internet speeds. Meanwhile, there was a case by Verizon. Now, basically, the deliverers, they call the last mile of internet to your house. The three largest are AT&T, Verizon, which are two giant phone companies, and Comcast, which is a cable company. And I personally have Comcast. So as a result of having this oligopoly, this three companies thinking as one, controlling all of our internet and mobile communications and our iPhones and iPads and everything else, we have the slowest internet in the modernized world. We're a little bit faster than the Philippines, and we're behind every country in Europe and almost every country in Asia, including China. Japan, South Korea is all ahead of us because of this little gang of three companies. Now, the three companies together are worth about $500 billion. I think the two phone companies are about 150 each, and the cable company and AT&T, which is really SBC, that's a long story, it's about 150 million each, and then there's about 100 million for Verizon. So the net worth of these three companies that are basically taking over the internet is about $500 billion. Now, the opponents of these three companies, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, together are worth $1.5 trillion. And of that $1.5 trillion, they have over $250 billion in cash ready to spend. So what happened was the D.C. court. Now, the D.C. court is the one that Obama's been trying to appoint 3 vacancies. There's 6 people on it, and there's 3 vacancies. And apparently there's one kind of moderate conservative named Silverman. There's 2 frothing pro-federalists, Scalia-type G.W. Bush appointees, and they're in control of all regulation, any regulatory issue from the big regulatory agencies that get appealed to the circuit court ends up in front of those 3 guys. So Verizon came in and said, I don't like net neutrality. We think that since we are an information supplier, that we should be able to decide who is going to get fast service and who is going to get slow service. So if I make a deal, Verizon make a deal with Netflix to provide, and they pay us to provide fast service, then Netflix is going to come on your phone faster than Hulu or its competitor. And that's the bottom line. So it went to this D.C. court, and the D.C. court said, well, there's 2 rules that Verizon doesn't like. First is transparency. We feel that the FCC has the right to decide and to require you to tell your customers what your policy is and how it works. Okay, that's not that important, but that's the rules. They can't keep it secret. And the other is anti-blocking. So basically, there's a rule, a net neutrality rule, that says that a internet supplier like Verizon, like Comcast, can't say, first of all, I have a subsidiary. Comcast apparently owns Hulu, and I'm going to take YouTube and I'm going to cut them out because I'm their competitor. And basically, that was illegal under the 2010 rules. And the other thing was you can't take a group like Netflix, which might be your competitor, and slow them down and then charge or help them by having them pay you an extra fee to be faster than their competitor. So that was the rule up to this D.C. court decision in January. So right now it's gone to the FCC, and the FCC is writing new rules. Now, what the court said was that the reason they can't do anti-blocking and anti-discrimination, even though it seems like it's pretty reasonable, is because under the Telecommunications Act of 1996, there's Title I, and Title I is information service companies, and there's Title II, which is telecommunications, which is a utility. So because it's not a utility, you can't tell these people what to charge and who to favor and who to discriminate against. So Wheeler, who's of course a cable guy, immediately said, oh, okay. And the court said, well, you can have a 2-tier and you can control the 2-tier a little bit on a case-by-case basis. Or you can throw out everything and make the broadband companies into utilities, and then you can tell them what to charge. Just like a water company can't charge $1 million for a glass of water because it's a utility, and the actual rates are set so that they make a profit, but don't make an incredible profit because everybody needs their service. Now, in a modern world, everybody needs internet, so the FCC can declare Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, broadband, ISP, internet providers, call them utilities, and then say you can't overcharge because South Korea has 5 times faster and better internet for 1/3 the price. Thank you very much. My name's Reed Silverne. Name of this show is Fed Pride, and I really, really appreciate your watching.